Thank you so much, Brett, for joining us today. You're a very accomplished entrepreneur and with a clear focus on social issues and how those issues can be improved with technical solutions. So first of all, I would want to hear, what are you currently working on and why did you get involved with that project?
I'm currently working on my second company, which is called Omella, O-M-E-L-L-A. And Omella makes it really easy to collect money from a very large group. And we're very focused on socially good organizations that have to do anything from a nonprofit to a club to a school. And the why is because I spent the first decade of my adult life, I shouldn't say adult, I was 18 when I started my first company. But I spent the first decade of my life building my first company, which is called Remind, which is one of the largest education companies in the United States now. That has over 30 million users. And I saw that collecting money for our teachers was one of the biggest problems that they faced. It took them a bunch of time. It was very expensive, and it was a huge pain point. And so I'm basically dedicating the next decade plus of my life to building this company, Omella, to help customers like teachers, nonprofit schools, collect money faster and save money on fees.
All right, that's fantastic. So how come you left this first company? Because that also sounds like a really rewarding and meaningful journey. So what led you to this new project?
That was one of the hardest things I've ever actually done in my life, because I started that when I was 18 or 19. I'm now 33. And in 2018, I decided to step out of a day-to-day role because I was the founding CEO from the beginning. And the reason I say it was one of the hardest decisions of my life is because it was basically my identity, in that I and of course my brother, who's my co-founder of my team, we birthed this thing from scratch and scaled it to a very, very large company. So there was times in the company where we were adding 200,000 or 300,000 people a day. The reason that I decided to step out of a day-to-day role was twofold. One, I was just emotionally exhausted. It had been a decade that I was running it. I don't think I treated myself very well physically and emotionally, whether it's health or sleep or exercise. And then the second reason was I actually felt like the company needed someone different for phase two, which was really scaling the business model. And I didn't think I was the right person to do that for Remind's specific business model. And so I basically fired myself, which was a very scary thing to do, especially when we had raised millions of dollars and we have hundreds of employees that were relying on us. But I cared much more about achieving our vision than my ego. And so I found a great partner, this guy named Brian Gray, who's the current CEO. And he's continued to grow the company with very similar value systems to what my brother and I had, which I'm very proud of. And I'm on the board. I'm very active from a strategic board perspective, but day to day, I no longer have responsibility, which, to be frank, is kind of nice because he's very good at that.
All right. So you said you'll spend 10 years working on this new project of yours. So in 10 years from now, how does the world look different?
The world or Omella?
The impact of Omella, like the the issues facing people trying to collect money, like how will their reality look different because of your work?
Yeah, it's a very unsexy market that we're going after, and it's a very unsexy, value proposition that we're providing. But I think it's a very big problem. I believe that there are millions of local leaders in their communities, whether they're a church pastor, they run a small nonprofit, they run a ski club or a school. Like, there are these people who are leading their local communities that spend an enormous amount of time in back office utility things. The biggest one is collecting money. What we learned, I talked to over 500 customers before we wrote a line of code. That's an important point. We really care about customers. We learned that if they don't have their money, their organization dies. It's very simple, right? It sounds obvious, but money is at the crux of everything that they do. And so what we want to do is make it dead simple for them to get that money quickly, save them money on fees, and save them a bunch of time. And while at it, make them look good. And so what success looks like is achieving our vision of letting those organizations and those leaders get back to leading. Like, I believe that they should be teaching, coaching, preaching, leading, not having to collect money on Venmo or doing an invoice via QuickBooks or a bill. That is what success looks like to us. By the way, it could be 2 decades for all I care. We want to be building this thing for the long term. And that means that when we make decisions in the day-to-day, though we move fast, we really do try to think with our customer in mind on what would help them in the long term.
Right, that's super inspiring. And as a college student, I can totally relate, to long Excel sheets, trying to keep track of membership dues and all of that. So I do see the potential there. If you could go back in time to when you were a young adult and started your first company, what advice would you give yourself?
That's so hard because hindsight is 2020 and it's very clear now. And I was a similar person in the respect that I had the same value systems. I just didn't have all the life experience I have now. Just as I won't in the next decade, I'll look back and be like, oh my God, what was I doing? But if I had a framework of what I would tell my younger self, there's so many ways to answer that question. I'm really thinking about it. That's a good question. No one's ever asked me that before. Ask it again.
All right. So if you could meet your 18 or 19-year-old self, or however old you were when you founded Remind, what would you try to convey to this younger version of yourself? What insights do you wish they grasped at that age?
This is going to sound very crass, and I might be a jerk saying it, but my emotional and physical health and the relationship with my family, specifically my now wife, who I was with 9 years ago when we were just starting out and I was sleeping on a couch because I didn't have a bed at the time. They're far more important than the company. I didn't know that at the time. And even if you told my younger self that, I would be like, whatever. When you're young, you think you're invincible, you'll last forever. You think your health will last forever. You're going to sleep amazing. You're going to be super strong. You don't have to work at those things. And I think I had a backwards framing for how to view the world in that respect. With that said, I don't regret any of it because I had to grind 17, 18 hours a day to build that company and to be really big. Thankfully, I don't do that as much anymore. One, because I just can't. I can't work 17 hours a day that consistently. Two, hopefully we're a bit smarter because we've had a bunch of experience. But I would think about trying to answer the question of what is a good life for me, and in this case for you or for anyone watching. What does a good life actually mean? And really, really think about that and try to build your life around that. And in the grown-up self, I'm 33, I'm still a kid at heart. But in the more mature Brett, it is my emotional and physical health, the relationship with my family, and then the company. Because if I don't have the first and second, third doesn't matter.
All right. Yeah. I see that.
It's very difficult to explain that to an ambitious young person and have them actually hear it. And frankly, I don't know if it's good advice, because if you told that to me as an 18-year-old and I actually listened to it, Remind maybe wouldn't have been at the scale that it's at now. And so I just had to go through that and learn.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you said earlier that on your second firm, Omella, you interviewed a lot of people to really understand the issue before you actually wrote your first code. Was that a difference which stemmed from your experiences with your first project, or have you always had that process?
It is deeply ingrained in my DNA as an entrepreneur. I like to think that I'm the most customer-focused entrepreneur on the planet. Other entrepreneurs are really good at software, really technical, maybe really good at business models. And it actually doesn't matter. It's not a comparison me against another entrepreneur, but in my DNA and who I am, I really, really love talking to customers, listening to them, and solving their problems. And I really went in with an open canvas and not assuming I understood the problem. And I went and talked to hundreds of these customers. So to date, I've spoken to over 1,800 one by one in about a 13-month time frame, one by one, just like we're doing now in these conversations. I happen to be talking a lot right now, but I always used to tell our old team that you have 2 ears and a mouth for a reason, and you should talk less. I don't talk as much when I'm talking to customers, but we really wanted to understand that it was a problem, and not just a little problem, a really big problem that goes very, very deep. And that's what we did. And so once we felt very strong conviction that it was a big problem, then we started writing code and rapidly prototyping. And thankfully now the company's starting to grow in a pretty healthy manner with some really great customers.
All right, fantastic. And as a final question before we wrap up, I'm just curious, if you manage to solve this issue all of a sudden in 5 years, let's say, what's your hunch for what the next project would be? What's the other issue out there you feel that some solution could help mitigate?
For me personally, I have no idea. I am so invested emotionally and physically in this company that I have no idea. There are a lot of problems that I believe in and care about, whether it's climate change or actually really making improvements in education or the financial system. I believe the financial system is screwed. Another problem I really care about is financial literacy for young people, because I think that's one of the most leveraged ways to help improve the world. If you actually teach kids how to save more than they spend, and the concept of compound interest, but I'm getting into details there. I don't know. I'll see when that time comes. I'm just trying to live in the present because I believe in what we're doing now. The more important question from that is not necessarily what I would be doing. It's what the student watching should be doing. And I do believe that if I was 18 again, I would care about optimizing for learning as fast as I humanly possibly can, more than a paycheck. So like I had friends who were making 80, 90, $100,000 a year back in the day, in 2011. I don't know if that's a lot of money now for a first-time grad, but it was a lot back then. And I was broke starting my company, but I was learning so much. And so I would optimize for the speed at which I am learning with really, really smart people over cash. Because in the long term, that will pay far more dividends than going and being a big cog in a wheel at some company that they don't really care about what they're doing. The second thing is, I do think that there's value in them focusing on something that they really love and care about. Whether that's nonprofit or for-profit, doesn't matter. If they care about it, they should be focused on that.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Brett. It's been an absolute pleasure.